What's going on, fellow patriots? So today I wanted to talk about the Colorado shooting and the Atlanta mass shooting. Now, when I heard about both of these stories, a lot of the facts were already out, so there wasn't much left for me to wonder about what really happened. But I knew more about the Colorado shooting than I did at the Atlanta shooting when it first happened. But as always, the narrative that the media and the left tried to push was complete BS. And there's no surprise there. That's how it always goes. Now, with the Atlanta shooting, everyone was just like, oh, he's a white supremacist, he hated Asian people, yada yada yada. Well, out of the 8 victims, 6 of them were Asian, 2 of them were white. How can you really call that a hate crime when all of the victims aren't of the same race? And it has been revealed that the guy had nothing against Asian people, had nothing against white people. He just had a hatred of prostitution. And yeah, I guess you could call it a hate crime against women, but I mean, unfortunately, those women were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And don't get me wrong, it was an absolutely awful crime, and I hope he gets the harshest sentence that he can get for what he did. But the narrative that was pushed was just so false. It had nothing to do with race. I mean, if anything, I guess you could call it a feminist issue. I mean, he didn't really like prostitution, but then again, I mean, it's not just a women's issue, so, it's that double-edged sword. But the thing that really gets me with these mass shootings in particular is this Colorado one in Boulder. All 10 of the victims were white. If you're going to call the Atlanta shooting a hate crime because 6 out of the 8 victims were Asian, why are we not calling this a white hate crime because all 10 victims were white? I mean, I guess we can't because they're white and not black or Asian or, Hispanic, whatever. But, it's that double standard that the left has. And I just loved seeing all of these racist white liberals who, before they even knew anything about what happened, besides the fact that there was a mass shooting, it was automatically, oh, these white supremacists, these white guys with guns and Trump supporters and all of this. And yet when they come to find out that it was a Muslim Syrian terrorist who was basically just anti-everything. I mean, anti-Trump, anti-white, anti-all these things. They deleted their tweets, and now it's crickets. You hear nothing about it from anyone on the left, except for gun control. And I'll get to that in a minute because I have quite a few things I want to say about that. But just the fact that it's automatically assumed that it's a white guy. Why? I mean, it obviously has nothing to do with the fact that the majority of the population is white, but everything to do with it, supposedly every single white person is a white supremacist, they're racist, and all of these other things, and yet they care nothing about trying to figure out what really happened, waiting for the facts to come out. And, that gets harder and harder every day because the media wants nothing more than to lie, wants nothing more to push a certain narrative to get us thinking a certain way instead of actually looking for what really happened. What is truth, what is not, and it's ridiculous. And I argue about this all the time in my American government class, and I've really started to irritate my professor about that. But how can you expect people to just sit by when you are actively lying about something, or actively, not lying, but just not telling the whole truth? You're pushing this narrative that is true, but it's not, and it has, it's misleading. But I did a research a year or so ago on the connection between presidential elections and mass shootings because it had occurred to me over the years that it seems to be that before and right after every single presidential election, so every 4 years, there is a spike in mass shootings. And the data that I found did in fact concur that every 4 years, every election cycle, mass shootings spike before the election and after the election. Now, that's usually like a year before the election, and the year after, it's usually pretty quiet the year of the election, which in our case would have been 2019, 2020, of quiet, and then 2021, we're 3 months in, almost 4 months, and we already have an uptick in mass shootings. And data also found that when it came to the presidential races and you had Democrats and Republicans, there's always a spike in mass shootings when it is a Democratic president. And that is not me being biased in any way. That's the cold hard truth. That is, every 4 years, mass shootings go up. Every 4 years, when there's a Democratic president in office, mass shootings definitely go up. And I've seen a lot of headlines talking about, mass shootings have stabilized in New Jersey. They're almost non-existent in California. Yet in Tennessee, my home state, there's a surge in mass shootings, and in Missouri and all of these other states. And, I don't really know anything about a surge in mass shootings in Tennessee. I think it's not entirely true as a whole, because I know there are mass shootings just everywhere, but as a whole in Tennessee, I don't really think that there's been any surge. But it looks to me, after reading those headlines, which the majority of them were authored by the same person, yet it's spread over like 10 different states. I don't really know how that works, but that's a whole another rabbit hole. But in my crazy mind and my conspiracy theory, all of that, it seems to me that the media is trying very hard to push this gun control narrative that all of these states, Colorado, California, New Jersey, New York, have very, very strict gun laws. And yet their gun crimes, their mass shootings have suddenly gone down, and yet in very free states in regards to gun laws have now had an uptick in gun crimes. I'm not buying it, because Tennessee just passed the constitutional carry law, and quite a few of these other states, when there have been supposed upticks in mass shootings, they're fixing to pass constitutional carry or other similar gun laws that have less restrictions than a lot of Democrats would like. And then it gets me thinking too, why are there these upticks in mass shootings every 4 years? Why are these upticks in mass shootings when it's a Democratic president? And I feel that the answer is because of gun control. Just last week, the NRA posted something about a massive gun control bill was just passed in the House last week. And I believe it goes to the Senate this week. And I don't see it falling through. Democrats hold the majority in just about everything, which is why midterms in 2022 are going to be so important, so we can get these people out, including the rhinos and all of those other people. But I think that the main goal for them is to push this narrative so that they can pass very harsh gun control laws, which is, number one, unconstitutional, and number two, it's what fits their narrative. Because after every mass shooting, what do you see from everybody? We have to have gun control. We can't have this happen again. And yeah, I agree, we can't have this happen again. But gun control is not the answer. It never is. If you look at the data and the statistics behind countries that force every single person to not have a gun, it's, extremely illegal. You can't have it. Violent crime goes up so much, it's ridiculous. And yet there are some countries in the world that require every citizen to have a gun, or at least have gun training, and yet their violent crime is way down. It's almost non-existent. So tell me how in America gun control is going to fix these issues and not make them worse. Because in Chicago, Illinois, very strict gun laws, violent crime is astronomical. And you look in places that don't have those strict gun control laws, and yeah, they have violent crime, but it's not the same as it is in Chicago, and it's just not as prevalent, because when you're able to protect yourself, crime just goes down. I mean, you have several instances where citizens were able to carry their gun and they saved so many lives. I believe it was Texas, where it was that church shooter, and this guy, he was carrying at the time, and he saved so many lives just by doing that. And, what happens when we take away guns? Who are we supposed to rely on? Are we supposed to rely on the police, who have been defunded, who now can't carry guns? Or if they can, their response time is, crappy, because we've taken away so many of their funds that, they can't do anything? I mean, how does that logically work? Because in my mind, it doesn't. And, a lot of people like to deny the fact that gun control doesn't work, but the fact of the matter is the statistics prove that it doesn't. Time and time again, we have done research on it. Other countries have done it, and we can learn from their mistakes, and yet the liberals refuse to do that. The Democrats refuse to do that because they want control. They essentially want an authoritarian government. They want something to where we, the people, are completely complacent. We have no say in anything. We do exactly what they say all the time, and they have all the power. And that's what they want. They don't want us to fight back. That's why they get so irritated when we tell them we're not going to wear a mask. When we get our stimmy checks and we go out and buy a new rifle or a new handgun and we buy out all the ammo, it pisses them off. And frankly, it should, because we're telling them that we have had enough, and this ends when we say it ends, and it's time for it to end. I actually just got told the other day when I shared something that, I'm done wearing a mask, and I have been. I've never really worn it unless I absolutely have to. If I can't do my business at another store, then I will put my mask on. Otherwise, I'm leaving. I'll give my money to someone else who won't berate me for not wearing a mask, but someone actually told me that if I'm not going to wear one, then I can go die. And you know what? If that's how you feel, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. If masks really work, it shouldn't be that big of a deal for me to not wear one, because your mask should protect you from me not wearing one. But I digress. That whole thing just irritates me. But this gun control narrative, it's there because every time there's a mass shooting, everyone always wants to ban guns. They want gun control, high capacity magazines, and all of these things. And I believe the crime was actually done with a handgun, but I digress. But the United States government has always had a history of false flag events. And frankly, the more that I do research, the more that I think that these incidents are false flags. And don't get me wrong, these events did happen. Lives were unfortunately lost, and I hope these criminals get the harshest sentence that they can. But what better way for the government to get what they want than to push false flag incidents like this? I mean, look at 9/11. We all know Bush was involved. He knew about it. What happened right after 9/11? You had the Patriot Act. What better way than to have a mass incident like that than to push this little bitty old act, and now here we are. It really makes one wonder, or at least me wonder, what the real agenda is, because they want everybody looking at their right hand while their left hand is hidden doing some other thing that they don't want anybody to know about. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that the government's trying to push gun control? Is it false flag events? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. This is your host, President Arwal, Freedom Speaks.